The war for information, influence, and decision-making is paramount on today's battlefield. Artificial intelligence is no longer a concept of the future. It's essential for America's national security and military dominance.
Artificial intelligence is just using computers and data to think and reason the same way a human would, but just at a much larger scale and speed. Artificial intelligence empowers a human.
From Soft Week in Tampa, Florida, I sat down with retired Green Beret and co-founder of Accrete AI, Bill Wall, to talk about a fight most Americans never see.
We haven't paid as much attention as a nation to the E, the economics, or the I, the information.
This episode is about changing how we think about war, technology, and leadership, and what it's going to take to stay ahead in the next fight. Bill, welcome to the Jedburgh podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Fran. I appreciate it.
We're here at Soft Week. We've got innovation out every door and window in this place. I mean, there's like 3 floors of it behind us. We've spent a lot of time over the last couple of, I'd say, year plus, really digging into what innovation is going to mean to the next battlefield.
Right.
Defining the next battlefield, really starting to try to drill down from the most strategic level in our conversations with the Sergeant Major of the Army, USASOC commander, 1st SFC command team. How do we take that strategy and then distill it down all the way to our conversations with like the 5th group commander?
Right.
And what does that mean at the ground level? How does that tie into training? And we always come back to kind of the same core soft principles, the soft truths about humans are more important than hardware, quality over quantity. And we know that in the next battlefield, technology is going to be at the forefront of everything. We're seeing it today.
Absolutely.
In Ukraine. It's changing how we are thinking about everything, even on the showroom floor over here. But our humans have to start to leverage this technology.
Absolutely.
And great humans we know use technology better. You spent over 2 decades in the Army, in the soft community, at every level. You focused on technology. You focused on IT infrastructure and enabling our soft operators to identify, close with, and destroy the enemy. And now you're doing it on the private sector side right now with Accrete. So I want to talk about all of it. I want to talk about the technology. I want to talk about your journey. I want to talk about the entrepreneurism that comes inherent to Green Berets and how they leverage that when they transition. But I think we got to start with defining first.
Okay.
What is AI?
Right.
Because you're in the AI space. It's thrown around all day long, and you can't watch TV or the news for 10 minutes without someone talking about AI.
Yeah.
So what is AI? Why is it important?
I love that question to start off with because it's so fundamental. And I talk to government customers all the time, and they say, "I want some AI." And I always say, "Well, like, what do you mean by that?" And you'll get various answers. Someone will say, "Well, I want to take all my data from Excel and have AI put it into SharePoint." I'm like, "Well, that's not AI. And why would you do that? That's a horrible idea." And then someone else will say, "Well, I want a drone that will circumnavigate the world autonomously, sniff up people's DNA, and then eliminate them with laser beams based on their DNA and their family connections." Like, okay, that's a great idea, but it's not AI and it's not possible. So,
Sick capability.
right. But so for us at the very basic level, and I'm really not a computer scientist or a technologist, so I try to make it simple. Artificial intelligence is just using computers and data to think and reason the same way a human would, but just at a much larger scale and speed. Humans are bandwidth limited. We can only take in so much information. We have to sleep 8 hours a day. We can only make
8 hours a day. No one in this place sleeps 8 hours a day.
For your health, you should be sleeping 8 hours a day. But you've got to sleep. You got to step away from things. But the machine, like the Terminator, is constant. And so getting a computer, a data to do the tasks and thinking that a human can do, but shouldn't necessarily do. So I in my tiny brain, I think of it like a Roomba. Do you have a Roomba?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it automatically just goes around and vacuums.
No matter what's on the floor.
No matter,
We've learned it with the dog.
But the good thing about the Roomba is there are some tasks that humans should never do again, and vacuuming is one of them. So when it comes to a lot of the data tasks that analysts are doing, that humans are doing, they shouldn't have to do that. Machines should be doing that for them so that they can do much higher levels of thinking that humans are really good at. So for me, that's what AI is. It's computers, data, doing human-like thinking at a scale and speed that humans aren't capable of.
What's an example of that?
So in my company, an example is we've built a product to identify foreign government involvement or leverage in a commercial supply chain. And that's a huge problem because there's so much data. And commercial data changes all the time. Every week, there's a new company, there's a new investment, there's a new merger, there's a new acquisition. I like to say that commercial data is the river you can't put your foot into twice. The moment you take your foot out, so much river has passed by, it's a different river. The data goes too quickly. So to enable a human to make sense of that data without artificial intelligence would take months on end. But with artificial intelligence, they can make sense of it in just hours or days. So it just speeds up the process they would naturally have done, but it does it for them in a much faster way.
The 9th Annual Global Soft Symposium Europe is taking place in Athens, Greece this October 7th to 9th. An exhibition with over 70 industry organizations showcasing their capabilities and networking opportunities along the Mediterranean Sea. The Jedburgh Media Channel will be there hosting the International Senior Leader Defense Panel, recording interviews with our partners and allies, and bringing you the most up-to-date look at how Europe conducts special operations across the world. Join us in Athens this October 7th to 9th. Registration is now open at gsofeurope.org.
And when you look at the soft community and even maybe the broader DoD, where are you seeing opportunities for AI to be leveraged, across I would say the warfighting functions?
Right. No, absolutely. So anywhere that there's a decisional situation where someone has to make a decision and they're overwhelmed by the amount of information they have to sort through, artificial intelligence should be there. And you see it in the drone world, which I'm not part of. You see it in targeting. You see it in understanding social media. You see it in the intel and open source information world. There's just way too much information to make sense of these days. So sorting through that information and figuring out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense so a commander or a staff can make a decision, that's where it belongs. Across the battlefield, across our government.
We've seen a lot of AI advancements in physical security.
Yeah.
So in my physical security company, I mean, that's what we deal with on every day when we're talking about integration of CCTV, access control, fire alarm, how AI is coming into play because it's giving you pattern of life data. It's analyzing that. And then instead of having somebody, the age-old conversation we have is we'll walk into an operations center and there will be 30 TVs on the screen. And I'll ask, oh, well, it's an operator there. Well, what do you do? I watch the cameras.
I watch the camera.
Yeah,
right?
and meanwhile, there's like a magazine, lunch is half eaten. And it's like, so how many cameras do you watch? All of them. You can see what happens at a minute level on each one of those cameras at any point in time when you're reading your magazine and eating your lunch. And then they kind of just stare at you and you realize like, yeah, you can't do any of that.
No.
So AI has been instrumental in the ability to identify patterns of life, deviations in pattern of life, triggers, alerts, and alarms.
And what a horrible job. Like no human should have to stare at cameras and computer screens for a 12-hour shift.
No.
Like we should not be doing that.
And they're not effective at it.
No, they're not.
So we've seen AI, I think, really kind of come to the forefront. We've talked about things like, other terms that get thrown out there like machine learning.
Right.
So in your words, like, what's machine learning and then how does that work with AI?
Yeah. So machine learning is just a component of AI. It's one of the things that are there. Natural language processing, neural networks. There's all these computer science terms and techniques that combine together to make a capability, right? So again, I'm not a computer scientist, right? I'm a layman. But machine learning allows an algorithm or a program to continually absorb new data and learn from that data. There's a great historical example. You might remember when Watson went on Jeopardy. Do you remember this? IBM Watson, right? And won Jeopardy. But there was a pivotal moment there where a question was asked, and the question was, what decade did Oreo cookies come to market? And the Jeopardy champion, Ken Jennings, rang in first. And he said 1930. He was wrong. And so Watson rang in, and Watson said 1930. And the reason why was Watson wasn't able at that time, in that generation of artificial intelligence and machine learning, to absorb new information. Watson only had what it had. A human, you or I, would have been like, oh, I thought it was 1932, but I'm not going to guess because I know that's wrong. Watson didn't have the level of machine learning to be able to do that. So machine learning is when the machine can continually get new information, understand the contextual place of that information, and then put it into its deliberations and decision-making process.
The Jedburgh podcast is brought to you by University of Health and Performance.
How do we weigh the positive that we get out of these computer models, quote unquote, the algorithm,
Yeah.
versus what's the point where it becomes detrimental or negative?
Yeah. I think it's all about the human, right? Like for me, artificial intelligence empowers a human. The first soft truth stays. It doesn't go away because of technology. Artificial intelligence doesn't negate the first soft truth. It's always about people. So if people are involved in the process, then it will be positive. If we let the machines run by themselves, it will end up going somehow astray. So there always has to be a human in the loop that comes back and corrects, recalibrates, ensures that it's still doing what we want it to do.
Yeah, I think that term "human in the loop" is the one that we hear kind of come up all the time, and that you always have to maintain it. Sergeant Major Weimer talked about that. We have to put a human in the loop to be the decision maker from the data, and if we allow the machine to be the decision maker, then we run into issues. I mean, we see that on our YouTube channel.
Yeah,
I mean, literally, where the processing works so quickly that in real time, as you're uploading a video, it will analyze it. It will give you recommendations, and then it will tell you, hey, this is, fit for any audience. This is going to get flagged for, there are 35 different versions of inappropriate content. But then we'll then make a decision for release or not.
Yeah.
And distribution across your audience.
That's right.
Which becomes frustrating when they don't get it right.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, now I got to go back. I got to challenge it. I got to fight it. Then you're fighting the algorithm back in to relook at all your stuff, but it's already made a decision. And you can't unlearn it. There's been a lot of discussion, though, about, well, the robots will take over, the Terminator situation. Where are you seeing the integration of AI in both the kinetic and the non-kinetic parts of warfighting?
Yeah, so I think everyone's seen it on the kinetic side, right? That's all the drone stuff. That's autonomous weapons and stuff like that, which we really don't do. So for us, it's all about on the decision side of the house, the intel analytics, campaign planning and strategy, like, understanding what's going on the battlefield with the enemy, understanding the enemy's strategy. And I think one area that we're seeing it grow, and you've heard General Fenton talk about this, is it's also understanding not just the enemy, but understand the environment. What's going on with the local populace? What are they talking about? What's their state of mind? There's a a great quote from our community from the 1980s, a Colonel John Wagelstein, who was the commander of the El Salvador advisors in the 80s. And he said the critical terrain in an insurgency or counterinsurgency is the 6 inches of brain matter in between the populace's ears.
Yeah.
So understanding the populace, I think, is going to be a huge thing moving forward. I don't know if we've always done that well enough, but using huge data collection, artificial intelligence, some of the things that are out there, I think that's going to move into a good direction for us.
Yeah. You brought up this foreign ownership, control, or influence a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think is really important when we talk about what is the next battlefield.
Yeah.
How do we define warfare? How do
Right.
we define war? What does war
Right.
look like, today versus tomorrow versus who our adversary is? In our conversations with the current SMA, with the 15th Sergeant Major of the Army, Dan Daly, with the congressman that we've had the opportunity earlier this year and late last year to sit down with, I've asked this question to a number of them.
Yeah.
And to get their different perspectives about how do you define war? And
Right.
what is the next battlefield? And I'll kind of pose that question to you, because when we look at something like, foreign control in the investments and in small businesses, and I'm looking out behind you because there's small business row
Right.
over there, and you got foreign investors who are funding these things. When does that become a risk? So when
Yes.
you look at the environment, you look around, how do you define warfare as we see it on the battlefield?
So like I said, I'm not a computer scientist. I study political science. And in political science, as an undergraduate, we looked at national power through the acronym of DIME: diplomacy, information, military, and economic. So we've been solely focused on the past 35 or 40 years, almost entirely on the M in DIME. And we do it really well. That we haven't lost very many firefights in the past 20 years. However, we haven't paid as much attention as a nation to the E, the economics, or the I, the information. It's ironic too, Fran. Like, here you are doing a podcast, you're on social media, you're talking to all these people. In the past 15, 20 years, the information environment has exploded, right? There's more channels, there's more apps out there for people to get their word out and to communicate across communities. But as U.S. government has kind of ignored that as a source of power and power projection. At the same time, our adversaries have embraced it. And the same way with economic power, like you said, foreign nations are making stealthy investments. They're buying companies. They're making, subsidiary arrangements, and they're hiding it all behind commercial activity, which is kind of hard to uncover. It makes me think, I was thinking about this the other day. Do you remember the movie in the 1980s where the Soviet Union invaded the U.S.? And there's a scene in there where a high school professor or a high school teacher is talking to his classroom, and as he's talking to them, Soviet paratroopers start drifting down into the schoolyard. And he's kind of looking at it confused. He doesn't realize what's going on, and that's the Soviet invasion. Well, nowadays, foreign nations don't have to parachute their troops in. They're parachuting in ideas through social media and information areas. They're parachuting in their influence in economic ways. And so for me, that's the battlefield of the future. We've proven that we can hunt down and kill or capture almost anyone. But those other realms, and our enemies know that. And so those other realms, the economic realm and the informational realm, is where the future battle is going to happen. And it's happening right now, actually.
Well, I think we're seeing it on social media.
Absolutely.
We're seeing it in the media.
Absolutely.
And to your point about how the media landscape has exploded, I think back to when I wanted to be when I was in undergrad, and my goal was to be a journalist. My goal was to be a network news correspondent. We had the 3 major networks.
Right.
And then we had the cable news networks were kind of coming, becoming more and more mainstream. But over the last 20 years, there's been this explosion of mediums by which anybody can be a journalist.
That's right.
I don't know if that says much for me now.
Yeah.
Man, maybe I just got finished paying BU from my undergrad.
Right.
So I'm not gonna figure out if it was worth it. But that's the reality of the situation. Is everybody can get out there and they can say whatever they want.
Absolutely.
Relatively get that narrative out. How do you think we're doing? As a country, maybe even as the DoD in combating those false narratives and misinformation.
Yeah.
And identifying it.
Right. I was at a conference, not this one, but a conference a couple months ago, and someone asked General Fenton that question. And before he could answer, someone else on the screen said, I think we're about, on the stage, said, I think we're about a C. And General Fenton said, yeah, actually, I think we're on an F. We're not engaging in the narrative battle. We don't even know what's being said in the narrative battle. We don't know in local target audiences. We don't know who the influencers are. We don't know what their discussion points are. So when the U.S. goes to a foreign country and does a military exercise, we have very little idea of what the reflections are happening in that society and what they're talking about. For all we know, the foreign nation is seeding in malicious messages about why we're there and what we're doing and portraying us in horrible, horrible ways. And the local populace isn't seeing any contrast to that, so they believe it. And the people that manipulate messages are very good at doing that. And so they're feeding into previous fears. They're feeding into previous incidents, and they're building on small truths to tell big lies. And we're not even in that space contesting it because we don't even know it's happening.
How do you identify it, though?
Yeah, right. That's my question. So first off, you have to have organizations that pay attention to that. And traditionally, and this is not a hit on our brothers in the intelligence field, they have always relied upon top secret, exquisite information because that's the best that the U.S. could provide. And in the Cold War, that was true. We needed that type of information to reach into borders behind the Iron Curtain and find out what the Russians were doing. But you want to know where the Russians are today? They're on VK. You want to know where Hamas is? They're on YouTube. We don't necessarily need the national intelligence community to tell us where our enemies are. They're broadcasting it. Here I am, Mom, crossing the border into Ukraine, right? It's on Facebook. It's on YouTube. It's on Reddit. So there's this vast array of unclassified open source information that we have to pay attention to, and we're not paying enough attention to it. And the reason why we're not paying attention to it is because there's too much of it and people are overwhelmed. So that's why artificial intelligence is so important, because it helps sift through all of that information and get to the important contextual things that people need to know to make decisions, to build counter messages, to build supporting messages, to understand the operating environment.
This show, conference, trade show, whatever you want to call it, Soft Week, is designed to bring the private sector into the spotlight of governments.
Yeah.
Okay, specifically special operations forces on a global scale, because we have partners and allies here from all over the world who are looking at the same stuff we are. The SOCOM specifically, have done a very good job, especially over the last couple of years, of identifying what they're good at and what they're not good at.
Right.
And saying, hey, if we're not good at it, we got to go find somebody who is. And so you've seen a real strengthening of the public-private partnership.
Yeah.
And you see that across the globe in a variety of both lethal and non-lethal capabilities. Why is it important that more broadly the DoD, the U.S. government, really begin to strengthen that public-private partnership when we're talking about innovation and technology advancement versus doing like the old NASA, idea of like, hey, we got to build it ourselves.
Right. Yeah. So I think the world has changed. 40 years ago, all of the innovation 80 years ago, innovation came out of the government because they had the resources, and innovation the innovation ecosystem of the United States wasn't what it is now. Now you're seeing all of the innovation is coming out of the, small innovative companies, industrial, what we call Silicon Valley, wherever you might be.
People's garages.
Absolutely. And it's really hard for most of those people to engage with the government because the government has so many challenges to doing business with them. So any event like this that helps break those barriers down, that helps get technology in front of users, helps the technology providers understand the government's process for evaluating and contracting technology is really important. You had to break through those natural barriers that have been over time, those bureaucratic barriers that have existed, and knock them down. And that happens here a lot.
Who determines what capabilities are out there that almost become like this is U.S. only versus, this is something we're going to market and allow to go out to our partners and allies?
Yeah. Well, Congress passes a law, the international ITAR, international
It's like trade agreement.
trade. Yeah. And there are specific systems that Congress prohibits from being sold. And we're talking about like specific types of airplanes or tanks or bombs or munitions. Versions of them can be, made for foreign export. When it comes to commercial stuff, like my company is a dual-use commercial government company, we sell commercial software. Anybody can buy our software. And I think the government is beginning to think more about should they have more control over that or not. Is artificial intelligence a general category of something that should have a governmental review on it or not? Right now it doesn't. So we make a moral decision of where do we want our software to work and who do we not want it to work for?
Yeah.
And so for us, it's an ethical decision, not a legal one. And that's how we look at it.
What's Accrete doing in the corporate space?
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Accrete started as a commercial company, and about 7 years ago, they were bringing artificial intelligence to the finance world. And really in the finance world, everyone in the finance world is seeking alpha, right? First decision advantage. And that's about the speed of your information and understand the context of it. So one of the products that we've made for the government information operations space came from the commercial space. And within the recording music industry, if you can imagine this, there was a pressing need for artificial intelligence to help the recording music labels identify viral talent before it went viral. You're looking at me like I'm crazy, right?
Yeah, I am actually, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because I got a buddy who actually is a Green Beret, just retired, who moved to Nashville, and he's a talent. I mean, he's a music artist representation.
Yeah.
And all I hear are the stories about how they got to go to 80 bars,
right,
and watch people perform,
right,
and maybe they don't even find one.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because that's the traditional model is you send your talent scouts to the cool bars, right, in Nashville and LA and Manhattan. They see the bands, right? 40 years ago, they're like, Guns N' Roses, that's the band, sign them. And you sign them before they get too big. And that's how the recording music label makes money. They develop that band, they make records, whatever they But now, the majority of music doesn't get released by bands in bars. It gets released on SoundCloud, YouTube, TikTok. And there's such a volume of it, 20,000 new songs and artists a week. So no talent scout can keep up with that. And then when they look at things online, it's very hard to distinguish whether or not someone's going to go viral or not. So for instance, if I was a young artist and I wanted to make a name for myself, the first thing I would do, I'd go hire a bot farm to give me 30,000 likes a week. But those aren't authentic likes, right? So if you have 30,000 likes, but they're unauthentic, then you're not going to go viral. But then you look at the opposite end of the spectrum. Let's say someone only has 5 followers. That can't be good, right? 5 followers. But if those followers are Taylor Swift and Jay-Z and Ed Sheeran, those are some pretty powerful followers, right? So they're going to go viral eventually. So we built this product to help talent scouts sort through the massive amount of information that was flooding them on a daily basis, make sense of what it meant contextually, and then make a business decision of, this is someone that we think we should start looking at and determining whether or not we want to contract. So we took that technology and we started thinking about how could the government use it, right? And part of my career, I have a CT background, right? So if you want to know where the next Salafist jihadist preacher who's going to lead an uprising in North Africa, if you want to know where he is, he's on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
That's where you're going to find him. And so you have to be able to understand what his following is, what his reach is. Is it authentic? Are people engaging with him in an authentic way? Is this someone we should pay attention to? And it's across all, that's how we look at understanding target audiences now. Is it's a growth from the recording music industry.
That's fascinating. And I'm thinking about your example of the next extremist leader. Thinking about how even 15 years ago, how that was all a manual process.
Yeah.
When you didn't have social media, you didn't have YouTube, you didn't have the ability to so rapidly get in front of so many more people.
That's right.
So from a targeting standpoint, it was a lot easier to track down when they're holding meetings, when
That's
you
right.
have a mass of folks coming into Libya to go have one of these.
That's right.
Others to be radicalized.
And we're using specialized intelligence, signals intelligence, and we're intercepting messages, and we're trying to understand what's going on. And now people are just doing it on their phone.
Yeah. Where do you think it goes? Like, there's no limit, right? I think that there's a lot of things that are coming and happening so quickly every year where we're looking back going, well, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that. And so it's very hard to predict and say, where are we going to be in 5 or 10 years, or what's the ceiling? Congress is trying to identify that.
Yeah.
Congress is, and I think even at the DOD level, they're trying to identify that. And with this conversation about what are the limits that we put on AI, what are the left and right boundaries that are going to help dictate how we govern and regulate this space.
Right.
Are there limits to this, and what are they? And as Congress probably uses AI models to inform them on how they're going to make decisions on this very topic.
Yeah.
I mean, what are those decisions, and what are the left and right limits that need to be put in place from a regulatory standpoint?
I think a lot of that's still in flight, and I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go. Our point of view on it is the most important aspect of artificial intelligence moving forward has to be its explainability. And I never want to put a person, an analyst, an officer, a non-commissioned officer in any organization in a position where they go to their boss and they say, hey, this is a bad company, or hey, we need to do this. And their boss says, well, how do you know it? Well, because Accrete said so, right? Like, yeah, the computer told me so, right? So there has to be an explainability portion to it that says, yeah, the machine learning algorithm came up with a recommendation, but here's the basis of that recommendation.
Yeah.
Here's the data that it looked at. Just like in college when you had to do footnotes. Here's all the footnotes, right? I'm not trying to hide my work from anybody. So as long as the artificial intelligence remains explainable and people aren't hiding behind this black box theory of it's too complicated, friend, don't worry your pretty little head about it, just do what we say, I think that's where it has to go. That's where regulations are going to eventually go towards, explainability.
Yeah. You said a couple of minutes ago that you're not an IT guy, you're not a tech, you're not an engineer. Well, you're a Green Beret.
Yeah, I was.
Which in my mind means basically, we live this every day in my company. You can do anything.
Yeah.
Talk for a minute about why come into the Army in the first place, and why become a Green Beret.
Yeah, so I came into the Army in the mid-'80s. It was a different world, Cold War era. I remember very distinctly as a young kid reading a National Geographic magazine, and on the cover of it was a Green Beret captain in Vietnam who went through a ceremony to become a mountain guard. And that was part of his, uh, building an alliance between two different tribes. And I was just fascinated by the idea of being a U.S. soldier, but working with a local populace in their language and in their culture. And that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be a Green Beret from the moment saw that article. And I went to college, and I knew in college I just want to be a Green Beret. So I was ROTC cadet, and knowing that I was going to graduate, knowing I couldn't get into SF right away,
Yeah.
but I got in as fast as I could. And so
What did you do first?
I was an infantry officer. I did a tour in the 82nd Airborne Division for 2.5 years. And then I went to assessment and selection. And I went to the Q course right after that. I was a first lieutenant in the Q course. I got there as fast as I could.
As you went through, you went through your career in really a time of monumental change.
Yeah.
We're here talking about technology,
Right.
but you really span that era of being trained in the 80s by a
Yes.
Vietnam generation
Yeah.
of special operator, and of leader. And then by the time you fast forward and get out of the military, we're in the GWAT.
Yeah.
And we're rapidly advancing, it's probably seemingly every day.
Yeah.
If you recollect, if you go back and you think about the career that you had and you saw this technological advancement, what are some of the biggest innovations that you think really changed SOF over that time?
Yeah. I remember as an ODA commander in 7th Group when we got computers for the first time, and we had printers. And the printers were dot matrix printers, and they had a roll of paper, and on the edge of the paper was these holes that would fit into spindles that would push the paper through the printer. And the way we decided to use them was for any type of paperwork we had to do with the S1, an award recommendation, a 4187, and we would space out on the computer screen where the words would end up on the Army form. And then we taped that Army form to to the paper that was going through the computer. So that's how I started, with computers. And it was, I literally remember, like, what are we going to do with this thing? Like, who wants a computer? Only to fast forward, 15 or 20 years later, and we're doing things like computer network operations. Like, who even heard of that? Like, when I was a captain, I never said to myself, I want to be involved in. And even in my as a senior officer in the Army, I never said, well, I can't wait to be in an artificial intelligence company, because no one saw that coming at the time, So you ask that question, like, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And I don't know what's going to happen next, but I do know that in our community, there's this ethos of being prepared for change and being able to take advantage of change as it happens. And so that's the important thing for us is we're always going to be flexible. We always have that mentality of we're going to think and figure things out, deep thinkers who know how to use violence when necessary, but not just violent guys, like deep thinkers. And that's always going to be one of the hallmarks of SF and the rest of the community too.
I want to ask you about transition.
Okay.
We spent a lot of time at Green Beret Foundation really talking about transition.
Yeah.
But recently, over the last year or so, have put a lot of emphasis on the next Ridgeline 2.0 program and developing really cohesive courses and classes that we could take transitioning guys, put them in, give them the skills to be able to go out there and succeed in the next chapter of their life.
Right.
And then also combining that with the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual side.
Yeah.
That's going to change when they come off the team.
That's right.
They leave SF and they go into the civilian workforce. One of the things that frustrates me is, and I'm out 9 years at this point, which is crazy because it feels like
Right.
One of the things that really frustrates me is guys get out as Green Berets and they spent this whole career, whatever it was, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years as part of a team.
Yeah.
with this group of like-minded individuals that whether they're on an ODA or on a JSOC staff or the SOCOM staff,
Right.
even the guys who work in the Pentagon, are on a team.
Right.
And they're there every day with these guys. And then they get out and they're like, oh, I'm going to move to, the middle of nowhere and I'm going to hunt and fish all day long. And then eventually, you hear stories about them in rehab,
Right.
like for drugs or alcohol, or you hear stories about them taking their own life.
Yeah.
Or getting divorced or, estranged from their family. And I'm going to compare us now, it's important, I think, because we got the Navy SEAL Foundation over here.
Sure.
But SEALs, I think, do a great job of bringing their guys in
Yeah.
post-service. And they go into finance. I got a buddy, one of my best friends from undergrad at Boston University.
Right.
And we rode together at BU. He spent 25 years on SEAL Team 6. And now he's working at Andreessen Horowitz.
Yeah.
As a consultant.
Yeah.
And then I feel like your story and guys like you who did this long 20, multi-decade career and then said, hey, I'm not done yet.
Right.
I'm not going to go off and do my own thing.
Right.
Are really impactful for the community to understand that, there's you have a next career.
Yeah.
And I started, opened this block up with, you were a Green Beret, you were a tech guy. But what being a Green Beret allows you to do, in my mind, and I tell my team at FR6 this every day, is we can't do everything, but we can do anything.
Right.
We just got to figure out how.
Yeah.
So can you talk about your transition, how you view the transition process?
Right.
What we as Green Berets bring to the next chapter of our lives?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, first off, what a great topic. And for our community, transition in some cases a life or death situation. Like the amount of the percentage of suicide that we have, the degree of PTSD that we have is horrendous. And for me, transition is a way to combat that. And I've been out 17 years now. That's frightening. And I learned a lot of things the hard way because there weren't any transition services at that time. The Honor Foundation didn't exist. The Green Beret Foundation didn't exist. I mean, there were none. There was a TAP, which was horrible in my day when I went through it.
But even for me, that's all there was when I
Right. Yeah. And so I think I've learned some lessons along the way. I think the first lesson I learned is the military and special forces in particular teaches us, and we learn inherently, that you are what you do. And and that's how you identify your self-worth and who you are. And I see it in transition. I go to transition seminars and guys introduce themselves like, I'm Bill Wall, I'm a Green Beret. No, you're not. And so the first step is to understand that if you drive your self-worth based on what you do, one day you're going to wake up and you're no longer going to do that from which you derive your self-worth, and you're lost. That's where guys get lost, is because I'm no longer a Green Beret. My whole life, I wanted to be a Green Beret, and now I'm not a Green Beret anymore, and I'm lost, and I don't have a sense of purpose, I don't have a mission. So you have to get over that first step. And there's 3 paths, I think. One path is, okay, don't change who you are. Embrace that. Be a Green Beret. So what can you do career-wise as a Green Beret? Go back to the schoolhouse and be an instructor, right? Go work for a company that has a contract supporting the community. Get involved in the Green Beret Foundation or any of the other, charities out there. Great. Hold on that community. Keep all the stickers on the back of your pickup truck, right? Right? Just own it, and that's who you are, and that's fine.
I love seeing those stickers, by the way. Because I live in Connecticut, so they're rare.
They're rare.
And every once in a while, I'll see a pickup truck go by with the Ranger tab or the SF unit patch, and I'm just hell yeah.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with keeping that. There's an additional path though. The other path is to say, okay, I was a Green Beret. That's a foundational part of who I am, but it's not all that I am. And I'm going to embrace a path of growth and learning. I'm not sure where it's going to end up, but I'm going down a new path to figure out who I can be at my fullest measure of who I am. And that's a scary path to go down for some people, right? Because you have to learn new skills. You have to learn to self-reflect in a different way. You have to understand that you're not protected anymore in the way you were in the past. You know, it was very simple in SF to know what your next jobs were going to be for the next 10 years. And you had a certain sense of value to who you are. And now you're going into this strange corporate world where you have to figure out who you are. The other thing I would tell you is the third path is, and we have to realize what a privilege it is to get a sense of value and self-worth from our job, because a lot of people don't have that. I guarantee you within 20 miles of here, there's some guy unclogging a toilet, and his job as a plumber is not his personal self-aspiration. It just pays his bills.
Yeah.
And his self-worth comes from his church or his bowling league or his fantasy football league or his kids or something else. So your self-worth and value doesn't have to come from your job. If it does, great, embrace that. But maybe think about where else does it come from? Because we get so absorbed in being a Green Beret that we forget there's a whole wide world out there.
Yeah, and as you said, that world can be super scary.
It can be.
You know, I think it's important too, and I want to talk about entrepreneurism
Yeah,
for a minute. And you know, as a business founder,
sure.
you know, you know, I'm living it now. People will say, well, what's the hardest thing? You know, some of the effect are like, oh, well, being a Green Beret must have been the hardest thing you've ever done. And I'm
Right.
no, man, that was the easiest thing I've ever done. The hardest thing I've ever done physically was being on the men's rowing team in college.
Yeah.
Because nothing's been as hard as that ever was, and nothing ever will be.
Right.
And then, but emotionally, at times physically, you know, mentally taxing is being an entrepreneur,
Right.
is being a founder, being a business owner. And I think that guys get out, and I was guilty of it. I see it every day. And they say, well, my next job has to be the next 20-year career.
Right.
It's, you know, I got, because they're committed. You know, commitment
Yeah.
is at the forefront, the foundation of everything we do. And so they get scared by this because they get so nervous that their first job out of the military has to be this thing that is going to be so perfect in every realm. They're never going to have to leave it.
Right.
When the reality is you have a lot of agency when you get out.
Yeah.
And you can go do whatever you want. What's your advice to the person who's sitting there saying, okay, I think, you know, it's time to move on, time to move into the next chapter, but is now scared about that first step?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I would tell him is your first step doesn't matter. Land anywhere, right?
Yeah.
When you parachute into a country, you just land where you land. And then you have to figure out where you're going to go next, right? Same thing in business. Take a role, any role, and do it and learn from it. What do you like? What don't you like? My first role, then when I got out of the military, I worked for a large company, a big IT infrastructure company. And I learned a tremendous amount there about how business is run, what good looks like in the business world. And after a period of time, I began to realize that I wasn't personally fulfilled there, because for me, personal fulfillment comes with being involved in change and transformation. And I was not going to change this big multinational corporation. And if they were going to change, it wasn't going to be by me, right? Yeah. So if I wanted to do that, I needed to be involved in smaller, more startup companies. And so I started gravitating towards those companies, which is it's a different world. So I had to go in to different roles and learn what startup companies are like and what's important and build up the skill set to eventually get to the position that I'm at. But it was a series of learning jobs. And interestingly enough, in 17 years, I don't know, I've had 8 or 9 jobs and 8 or 9 companies. So when I talk to people about transition, one of the things I say is transition isn't a one-time event. Transitions, you're going to continually transition. You're going to grow in your skills. You're going to transition to new roles. You're going to move to new companies. I hope you don't spend 20 years in one company. Like, that sounds horribly boring, and it doesn't sound like you're growing to me, right? Maybe that's good for some people, but I'd like that challenge of learning something new and then applying it in another place and learning something new everywhere I go.
Yeah. That's 100% how I view it too. I mean, I got out, I went and worked at Bank of America. I
Right.
knew day one, this wasn't going to be for me.
That's right.
But I also knew I wasn't going to quit.
Right.
I wasn't going to walk away. There was something to be learned. I
Right.
knew that however long that lasted there, it was, I will be better at
Yeah.
the end of it. And those relationships that I met were instrumental in starting this show when
Right.
I had met the CEO of Jersey Mike's.
Right.
And then when I started the show 3 years later, called him up and said, hey, would you be a first guest? And he said, absolutely. And 4 months after that, I was just calling him up to wish him Merry Christmas. And he asked us what we needed. And I said, well, I'd be awesome if I had a sponsor. And he's like, well, you have a sponsor.
That's awesome.
I'll send you a check today.
Yeah.
And they did it. They got us through the first 2 years
Yeah.
of the show. Which all comes down to, kind of jumping in and saying, I don't know if it's not going to be forever. And then, I've subsequently had multiple roles. But when we look at entrepreneurism and then starting your own business, it's totally different.
It is. And
It's totally different.
I think something that guys have to think about is what their personal risk profile is. If you're coming out of the military and you have 3 car loans and your house isn't paid off and you have 6 kids that are getting ready to go to college, you've got a high financial risk. So maybe entrepreneurial is not the way to go because 90% of startups fail, right? So if your startup wins, if it's successful, great. You hit the lottery ticket, you're good to go. But if you're in the 90%, you lose everything. So maybe start a little smaller, get your feet in the business world, start with an established company, learn, right, what business is like, and then build your risk profile to the point that you can accept a little bit of risk in your personal, professional, and financial life. And what's really interesting is we all have the skills to succeed in business. We just don't know it yet, and we don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
So when I first started in business, I was doing business development, and my job was to capture new business. Well, having spent many years in the JSOC community, I understand how to capture things, right? We have a methodology for that: find, fix, finish, exploit, and analyze. And that was the methodology to hunt down Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all those guys. That same methodology translates to the business world. It's different words, it's different activities, but it's the same phases. And so instead of find, fix, finish, exploit, and analyze, it's identify and qualify and propose and close. And there takes different skills, but it's kind of the same thing. And so we have a plethora of knowledge and experience that is applicable to the business world. We just have to have some experiential learning to know how to translate that into a new language and a new way of doing things.
Yeah, I always say you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you have these inherent soft skills.
Yeah.
And then what we have to do is get the experience and the hard skills so that we can actually apply them.
Right.
When you're faced with the tough business challenges, which mostly comes around, managing the financials, the cash flow,
Right.
Understanding marketing,
Right.
understanding sales cycles. But it's like all those things can be taught.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, I think guys have to be willing, as you talked about, number one, understand the risk. But then 2, be ready to constantly evolve and change.
Absolutely.
And I always have in the back of my mind what you said, that most of these are going to fail.
Yeah.
So how do you not? And I always think that you got to continue to do what Green Berets are great at, and that seize opportunity from challenge.
Yeah.
And everything that comes your way, it can't be no.
That's right.
It has to be how.
Yes.
And if you continuously put that in the back of your mind and reiterate that to your team, reiterate that to yourself every morning when you wake up, that, today is not the day where we say no, then I think the opportunities will come. And again, you don't know where those opportunities are going to take you.
Yeah.
Because you got to have every conversation.
Yeah.
And if you have every conversation, you're going to probably waste some time in getting the big light bulbs go off, and you're like, oh, it's so awesome. And you realize, well, maybe it's not so awesome. But then you had another conversation, which might be that thing that takes you to the next level.
Yeah, so for me, like entrepreneurialism is a lot like when I ran the 18 Alpha course, right? And we would do a training exercise for the students, and they at the end of the exercise, they would always want to know what's the answer, what's the blue book solution, right? And I'm like, I don't know, you tell me what the answer is. There's no answer here, right? And so entrepreneurialism, there's no checklist. There are all sorts of things that you can learn from, but if you're a checklist driven person that needs to be told what to do to understand your job, then entrepreneurial is not the place for you.
Yeah.
Right? Because every day I'm trying to ask myself, not am I doing everything well that I know to do? What I'm really thinking about is, what am I not doing that I should be doing that I'm not thinking about? And that's a different mentality as an entrepreneur, to constantly be thinking about what should I be doing that I'm not doing. But it fits our mentality well because Green Berets think like that.
That's a conversation that I have with myself every day.
Right.
And it usually it's always at night. Like kids go to bed, like wife goes to start watching TV, and I'll sit there in the kitchen or in my office and go, okay, I can go to bed. I could go watch TV because I haven't seen anybody in weeks. Or there's a list of things that I need to be doing to get to the place that I want to go. And then you got to weigh your risk reward
Right.
on what decision you're going to make there in that moment. But for me, I'm always thinking about that same thing. Like,
But no one's going to tell you. No one's going to hand you that list and say, here are the 10 things you need to do today.
No.
You have to do it yourself.
yeah, that to me, it's the drive, the adaptability,
Right.
curiosity, those characteristics that we're looking for.
Curiosity is huge.
So, and the ability to just continue to go get after it.
Right.
Bounce back, I think, comes back to my mind. You running the 18 Alpha course, you intentionally put guys in positions to fail to assess their bounce back.
That's right.
That's entrepreneurism.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is you put them in undefined situations that don't have clear, concrete answers, because that's the entrepreneurial world.
Yeah.
There's no blueprint for what's going to be successful. You have to discover it every day as you keep figuring out where your business is going and what the right thing to do is to make it grow and be successful and bring value to your customers.
What's next for Accrete?
Wow. So Accrete is, our government business is about 5 years old. We've gotten significant traction, but we're not a big company yet. We think we have amazing technology that has a application across several different domains and customer sets. I think for us, it's just continuing to grow. It's continuing to educate customers. One of the biggest challenges in innovation is, Henry Ford's famous quote. Do you know Henry Ford's quote? Henry Ford said, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, because they couldn't comprehend an automobile, right? So for us, there's a lot of education with customers about what the art of the possible is, what you could be doing, not what you are doing, but what you could be doing. So technology and innovation is transformational, and transformation is about a journey. So I'm on a journey with my company to transform the way customers do things, to use artificial intelligence to make them better at their core mission. So that's a never-ending job. I can do that forever. And there will always be transformational needs. Technology, AI capabilities will continue to advance. We'll find more and more places where it makes sense to use them, and we'll find more and more places where it brings value to customers to get to their end mission, which, supporting the SOCOM community, there could be no higher mission, right? Like, it's an honor and privilege to support all of our, organizations, much less the ones we came out of, because they've got hard missions, and having been there, I know what those guys are struggling with, and they just want a little bit of help. And so that's for us where we think we're going.
Awesome. Well, it's a busy week.
A huge business.
We're going to get you on your way here at the Tampa Convention Center. You guys are doing awesome work.
Yeah.
And we appreciate your leadership, both, at Accrete and what you're doing now, and your time in service leading the rest of us young Green Berets coming up behind you. But, you really set the foundation for so many of us to follow in a great path, and really enjoyed, looking up to you and all of those that served, with you a few years ahead of me. And thank you for charting that course.
No, Fran, like everyone else, I stand on the shoulders of giants, that went before me. And I learned so much, in those early years. The guys that were in special forces were guys who, all had foreign names, who had all come into the community through special programs that were set up to pull people out of the Soviet Union behind the Iron Curtain, Jakovenkos and Ivan Ivanovs and Shacknows, and being around those people and learning the values that they passed down to us to be involved in making your units better and transform them for the future carries on. It's an honor to support the company, and not just that, but to continue to support the community as people transition out, because we haven't always done that really well. So we've got a commitment, me personally and as a company, to support that transition process also, because the next mission is out there. It might not be with a Green Beret on, but it's out there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, whatever we can do to help, we're here.
No, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
American Jedburghs went on to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast, an official program of the Green Beret Foundation. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other long and short form content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow the Jedburgh Podcast and the Green Beret Foundation on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, or Threads. Send your comments and inquiries to fran@jedburghpodcast.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh Media Channel and the Green Beret Foundation remain committed to supporting all generations of U.S. Army Special Forces and their families. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.